welcome back. I'm Sarah, and if you are watching this back on the replay, hi. There is a setting where you can see the questions and see the comments that people are leaving. So if you wanted to follow along that way, you can turn that on. So I just kind of read comments and answer questions, and so that's how these lives usually go. So thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. Hello. Hope you're having a good night. For anyone who's new, hi, Minute Man. Good to see you. What does leaving faith mean? It means that this whole account is for people who are deconstructing or questioning their faith, and I no longer believe in God. Hey, Dr. Joe. How's Mr. Rabbit? Here, let's see. Wait, where's the little... There's Checkers. Now you can see Ruby's fluff. Ruby and Checkers are usually pretty good friends. Hi, Panrack. Hello. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Checkers is really sweet. Well, I'm glad you're out then. Hi, Max. Yeah, candy coated was an interesting way to put that for sure. Oh, mice are very cute. Hi, Herb. Yeah, no, Brandon says, weird question. Are you actively anti-theistic, or is it more of a some people do, some people don't, either's okay? Definitely the latter. I think religion can be helpful. I think religion can be a good thing. It just is a very powerful thing. So it also can be a bad thing. And so, yeah, I think honestly, we're all just doing our best to figure out what's real and what's true. So I think if your faith in God brings you hope and joy, that's great. Hi, Tyler. Okay, I think it's time for some moderation. Okay. Hopefully that takes care of that. It is wild. I get the craziest comments on YouTube. Return to my first love. You don't actually know what my first love was. Which people, Brian? Don't kids have bedtimes anymore. Yeah, I do imagine that most of the really wild comments that I get are from teenage boys. Oh, wait, let me show you Checkers again. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, those were the negative comments I was speaking about. Look at her little tiny feet. I love when she stretches her legs out like that. Who knew bunnies did that? Okay, sorry. Yes, exactly, a bun sploot. She definitely like sploots out her little legs. It's so cute. Brandy says, well, the word states that he who believes will receive the crown of life. Yeah, interestingly, the Bible is a bit contradictory about who goes to heaven and why. Yeah, you're welcome, Brandon. Well, Brian, if you have a PhD in bunnies, you should definitely get them. Hi, Michelle. Well, Brandy, that comes across just as a cliche and not all that helpful. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. What does that mean, Kyle? Apostate Sisters, hey. Thanks for coming. Oh, aboutness is I think, therefore I am. Got it. Oh, well, thank you, Tyler. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Archbishop, I mean, the idea of everyone who believes going to heaven is certainly would make for some awkward reunions. Hi, big girl. Hi. Oh, well, thanks so much. Yeah, the chill vibe is more my style. To be fair, I don't like when people yell at me. Brandy, nobody hurt me. Hey Jim, you are not late to the party. I just started like 8 minutes ago. Yeah, Waterloo is great. Leaving faith, what does that mean? It means that I used to be a Christian and now I don't believe anymore. Yeah, my name is Sarah. Spark, hello, hello. Yeah, Herb, I get the who hurt you quite a bit. It's interesting that the assumption is I must have had something traumatic happen for me to not believe anymore. Was it a compound thing? So it was like I first started questioning the doctrine of hell. And so I needed to like dive deeper and figure out, why do I believe what I believe about hell? Like, where did that belief come from? And so then it was just sort of like more trying to find more and more answers. And eventually I stopped believing it was true. Brandy, your assumption is that the reason I don't believe in God is because someone hurt me. That's the assumption I'm telling you is incorrect. Oh, Brian, I will tell you, I never watched God's Not Dead. I didn't think it would, I would enjoy that. Apostate asks, so was your deconstruction very slow? I guess it's all relative, right? It was about a year, I would say, from when I first started questioning to when I got to the point that I just didn't believe anymore. So yeah, I don't know if you think of that as fast or slow. Yeah, I agree, Brandon. It's not necessarily an emotionally driven thing. Sometimes it's just logic where you say, this just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Brandy says, what do you believe in then? Well, I don't believe in anything supernatural, if that answers your question. Larry asked, how do you navigate your life now? So I definitely took some time to really figure out like what my core values really were. GPS. And so, you know, I think for me, like I navigate my life based on empathy, on compassion and kindness, but also on truth. Like I want to know what's true, and I value people who honestly communicate. And I do my best to also be honest. So that's, yeah, that's kind of how I guide my life. Is MapQuest still a thing? I don't know. Hi, Matthew. Oh, well, thanks for watching that, Jimmy. I appreciate it. No, Brandy, usually when Christians ask me what I believe in, they're talking about something supernatural. Natural things don't require belief as much as knowledge. That's interesting. Yeah, Apostate says, I realize now I had questions long before I allowed myself to actually entertain them. So I can't pinpoint my deconstruction length. Was your year of deconstruction fairly intentional? Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it. I think I didn't even realize that I had some of the questions that I had. Oh, Mike, thank you so much for becoming a member. I really appreciate that. Um, and it was definitely a pretty stark moment when I had my first, like, whoa, wait a minute kind of question. And that was, wait, this idea of hell actually seems unjust instead of just. What do I do with that? And I guess then, yeah, I would describe it as intentional, like intentionally trying to find answers. Joe, you talk to your pastor and you find they knew less than they. Oh, I'm sorry that it didn't go well then. Oh, how many bunnies do I have? I have two. What is the foundation or grounding for your morality without God? It's empathy, basically, like how do my actions harm or help other people? Oh, sorry, there's a little moth in here. Do you think everything goes black when we die? I mean, I think we just cease existing. So I don't think we like sit in existence of blackness. I think we just stop existing. Jimmy asked about the llamas. Um, if you've watched the, I think it's the most recent video I did with Justin from Deconstruction Zone, I showed off these llamas that I painted. I was very, very proud of them. Brandon says, as a Catholic myself, I've read a lot of the early theologians and Christian leaders. A lot of them hold to some sort of invincible ignorance. If they've never heard about Christ, they are judged by the heart. So, on one hand, while I think that seems more reasonable than sending people to hell who have never heard, I think it brings up more questions. Like, why would God ever allow there to be a scenario where someone had never heard? And why is it that those people who've never heard, God suddenly is able to waive the rules for them? That for someone who's never heard, he can just forgive their sins without them accepting Jesus, even though that's supposed to be a requirement, almost as if God cannot forgive you without Jesus. So it's, on the surface sounds nice, but I think makes things even more complicated. Yeah, Haas says, what's insane to me is if God wanted to be known, why'd he leave it all to some Bronze Age nomads? Why not just show up every few decades and be seen worldwide in an identical fashion? Yeah. You know, when I say things like, I think Christianity spread in a very human way, that's kind of what I mean. Like, if the spread of Christianity is supposed to be sort of supernatural and driven by miracle power, you know, what would have been impressive is if, you know, Jesus had appeared simultaneously to all the different people groups and everyone started writing about Jesus at the same time in history. Like, that would have been cool, but it didn't. It happened in a very human way. Hi, Shishi. Hey, skeptic. Brandon says Romans 1 answered that even pagans have the law of God written on their heart. But again, that means they're being judged by like whether they followed the law. And it sort of is alluding to or imagining that everyone actually does believe in God, and it just isn't true. Raging says empathy is very subjective and inconsistent. Won't that lead to confusion and chaos when trying to solve a moral conflict or explain a moral obligation? I actually don't think it is that inconsistent. I mean, empathy is based on how your actions affect someone else. And we can measure that objectively. I can measure, you know, if you are being harmed or not. And the nice thing is we have both empathy and logic. So empathy doesn't exist all by itself, but you pair that with logic. So now you have logic to weigh, okay, which action is going to cause the least amount of harm? And you have the brain power to even weigh short-term harms versus long-term harms. Our brains are capable of doing all of that. Oh, Michelle says, how do I become a member? I don't know if there's a button up here. There should be a button somewhere. I actually don't know where it is. Tyler says, how often do you get on your live? I do this on YouTube every Tuesday and sometimes Thursdays, but I also have a TikTok that I'm on a little more frequently. Hi, Rachel. Yeah, Raging says, so if we define an action as morally good or evil depending on how much harm it causes others, and we can objectively measure that harm, wouldn't that be considered objective morality? It truly depends on what objective morality means in that situation. So when I have this, oh, Brian, thank you so much for becoming a member. I appreciate that. When I have this discussion with Christians and they want to discuss objective morality, typically what they mean is like a universal law that exists outside of anyone's mind, like gravity. Whether or not I believe in gravity, it still exists. And morality is a little different than that. Morality is something we do create in our minds. So in that sense, it is subjective because it is subject to our mind. But I agree that we could argue that parts of it are objective if you think of it that way. George says, how important are the moments of our life if death is the end of our existence? I mean, I would say incredibly important because they're limited. If our lives were infinite, how important would any one moment be? Oh, thank you, Michelle, for the super chat. I appreciate that. Yeah, Joe says, since deconstructing, I have found life to be more meaningful. Friend of Christ says, so you're saying we are a fart, here to make noise, smell a little, and then we are gone. I don't remember, is it in like Solomon or Ecclesiastes or somewhere that's exactly how we are described, right? Like a puff of wind or a gust of wind. And there is a Kurt Vonnegut quote, I think, that says something like, we're here just to fart around for a bit and don't let anyone tell you any different. Which I think is kind of absurdism rather than just nihilism. But, your life is as meaningful as your perception. You are alive now, and so it's meaningful to you right now because you get to experience it. Farts from Doug. Michelle, I think Brian said how to find it. Let me scroll up and see if I can find his comment. Brian says it should show message area, smiley face, send message. If the message isn't there, you can become a member. Oh, Herb says it's the join button just below the screen. Oh, thanks, Apostate. Well, Jordan, I mean, it's certainly a beautiful thought to hope that good overcomes evil. Have a good night too, friend. Pan says, according to Mormon doctrine, you can still be converted to Mormonism after you die. Dead Mormons act as missionaries and you can still reject it. But why would you reject it if you know it is true? Oh, wow, there's I have so many logistical questions. I guess then it would be the assumption that you know it's true, but you just really don't like God. Maybe. Hi, Sheila. Oh, wow, Brandon, that's wild. Oh, do you have to be on a computer? That's interesting. I have no idea. I wonder if when the live is over, if you just go to my like profile page. Oh, well, you're so welcome, Jose. I'm glad it's been helpful. Well, thanks, Panrek. I have a lot of experience in evangelicalism, which is maybe parallel in some ways to Mormonism. George says, I have really felt God all my life. I think he's real. I believe you. I believe you have felt that. Yeah, and I think there are many people who have had experiences, and that's what really drives their faith. So I can understand that. Hmm. Yeah, Apostate says that's why good psychology has been so helpful to us. We understand harm much better than we once did. Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, our advances in understanding humans, our psychology, and our neurology, hopefully is leading us to treat each other better. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. If you want to support, I actually just finished it and published it today. I have basically like a guide to healing through movement. So I'm a physiologist by profession with, expertise in exercise. And so I created a document that is hopefully helpful to people who want to use exercise and physical activity and movement to kind of work through deconstruction. So I have a link in my link tree in my bio if that's something you're interested in. Hi, Rasta. Lady says morals cannot evolve. I mean, what humans have thought was moral has definitely changed over time. Oh, thanks. Hi, Bailey. Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, if you have any specific questions about like making adaptations to walking with a cane, just DM me and we'll just chat it through it. Lainey says, it depends. She argues you can be moral without God, but what made morals? Who set the boundaries for morality? So we did. We developed morals, and morals are a product of evolution. It is beneficial for us to have empathy, to have compassion. Those are beneficial traits. And so, because we developed empathy and because we also have logic, we are able to understand that our actions affect other people, right? We can know that, okay, my action either helped or harmed. And so, because we have those two elements, the empathy and the logic, that creates a moral system. Yeah, you bet, Michelle. Humans and the butler. Raging says, I get how empathy and logic provide what you feel and how to act accordingly, but I don't get how it provides the why you should perform a certain action. I mean, I don't think it's any more complicated than I know what it feels like to be hurt and I don't want to hurt someone else simply because I know it feels bad. Like I don't know that it's any more complicated than that. The blue mug that I painted, it's in the dishwasher. So Laylee says, well, what is our unsaid agreement about morality? Not everyone follows this, but I do not think that morals have sprung up from dirt and then germs and fish. Well, I mean, we could have a longer discussion about evolution, but I guess kind of the hard thing to wrap your mind around is that we do see more rudimentary morals in other mammals, and we can understand evolution through. I mean, do you accept evolution? Pan says, I get my morals from Paddington Bear. If you are kind and polite, the world will be right. George says, some of the most enlightening and heartwarming writings I've ever read are from the Bible. George, have you read the whole thing? Like all of the Old Testament too? Hi, Rational. Tupac, hi. Yeah, George says, I guess I like to read and think about nice things more than nasty things. As do we all. Well, most of us. The problem, though, is if you're going to follow a God, you want to take the time to figure out if that God is good or not, I think. I think you'd want to do that. And so you have to read all the stories about God to know his character, right? And if you ignore the bad parts, you're not really knowing God, you're just knowing the version that you've created. Dinovic says, I never believed in God, but I never hurt anyone. I always feel compassion with the fellow next to me. I don't steal. I do no harm. I don't need God for that. I had parents who raised me right. Yeah, and I think like your empathy and logic guide you in those things. Absolutely. Helping says, where are the pets tonight? That's why I'm here. No, I totally get it. Come for the pets. Checkers was here earlier, but I think she put herself to bed. Ruby is snoozing behind the couch. No, I mean the chair. She likes it back there. Hey, Rubes. I'm sorry, did I wake you up? Yeah, I know. You're a big sleepy doggy. Good girl. Sorry, Ruby, if I woke you up. Don't worry, she'll go right back to sleep. I had someone comment on my last week's live that said, well, the talking was good, but I was disappointed you spent so much time on the animals. I was like, oh no. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Hi, Em. Well, Gaia, to be fair, we're essentially using morals and ethics as synonyms, even though they aren't. It's generally how we're discussing them. Yeah. Raging says, what if someone doesn't care about human suffering and doesn't have empathy for it? They aren't morally in the wrong if empathy is a basis for morality, though, right? So, yeah, Raging, this is what I was talking about when Christians want an objective moral. So, what you are asking for is, isn't there some standard of what is good and bad that is outside of a human mind? And no, I don't think that there is. You know, there are certainly people who don't experience empathy. They don't feel bad when people suffer. And, you know, those people have essentially two choices: behave the way society expects you to behave, or probably eventually leave society. Thank you for the super chat, JCal. JCal says, the talking was good, but too much time with the animals. Yeah, I know. It's actually the first time I've gotten that criticism. Hi, Mike. Um, let's see. Yeah, so I'm with Dr. Joe on this. The bad or hard parts of the Bible, yes, I agree. There is a lot of commentary on it, and there's a lot of ways that Christians try to make that okay. But it is not an adequate explanation. And certainly it ends up meaning that the only underlying moral law is obedience, and that's it. Like any action could be considered moral as long as God commands it. Oh, Scotty, you think I have built-in AI? How fun. Yes, exactly. Raging says, if any action can be moral as long as God commands it, then wouldn't that be subjective morality? Yes, I agree. Like if you get your morals from Christianity and the Bible, that is a subjective system. It is not objective, even though Christians will claim that it is. Yeah, Pan says, I'm still interested and fascinated by the Bible as literature, not as the work of a divine being. It's absolutely interesting literature for sure. Yeah, but to your point, Dr. Joe, sometimes the way it's written, like if you've, I don't know if you've seen the Bible studies that Justin and I are doing, but several times I've made that comment of like, okay, this is just bad writing. Like this is not well written literature. Is it common for pastors to not know much about biblical arguments or contradictions? Thanks, Dr. Joe. Potentially, I mean, I think, and Justin would be able to give you a better answer. I have certainly experienced many pastors who didn't seem to actually know that much. Theoretically, they should have at least gone through seminary. I imagine that some programs are more rigorous than others, but I don't. Yeah, I'm sure there's a big variance. Oh, that's interesting. Rational says, depends on the type of pastor. In the Southern Baptist Church, you don't have to go to seminary to become ordained. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and I suppose if you were a pastor in which you were in kind of a Bible Belt area, um, oh, Canvas, thank you so much for the super chat. Canvas says, keep up the amazing work. Wow, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's really kind. Sheila says there are 4 churches in my town with Timu pastors. Yeah, W can, for sure. Yeah, Herb says, I suspect they know but actively avoid the nasty bits of the Bible. There was, if you all are probably familiar with No Nonsense Spirituality with Britt Hartley, and she recently did a video about that, that many pastors know a lot more than what they're preaching, which is incredibly frustrating. Cute Puppy says, Revelation says there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought Satan and his angels. Does God not get his hands dirty? Perhaps it's beneath him at that point. The whole concept of there being a war in heaven, though, I think really contradicts the idea that modern Christians have about heaven. It's supposed to be this place with no pain and no suffering and no sin, and yet there's a war. Godspeed says, as a former pastor, can confirm. Wow. Yeah, Joe says, the pastor I talked to is Southern Baptist. I was surprised when he didn't seem to know much while discussing my deconstruction. And certainly, if they don't have those conversations very often, I guess I wouldn't be that surprised. Yeah, White says, agreed you can have good morals without God, but some people need God to follow good morals. Before I started having these conversations, I would have said, no, come on. But multiple times, I've had people ask me, like, wait a minute, if you don't believe in hell, why aren't you out just hurting people all the time, doing terrible things all the time? Which shocked me as a question because I don't want to. Like, I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to do terrible things. And the next follow-up question is like, wait a minute, is the only reason you're not doing those things because you're afraid of hell? Like, oh yeah, I guess if that's the case, I hope you keep believing in hell, Oh, that's wild, Rational. The SBC as a national entity does not set educational requirements for ordination. Each local Baptist church independently decides whether seminary is necessary. This is also a really good point. Apostate says, I think more people think they wouldn't have self-control because they were taught that. Yeah, the whole thing that we were taught that your heart is wicked and all of your desires and intentions are evil, and you have to stay in the word every day or you're going to stray and become this terrible person. Yeah, good point. We were definitely taught that and taught to be afraid of that. And what an interesting surprise, when we stopped believing and still remained kind, compassionate people. What denomination were you involved with? Several different ones. So I don't claim one as like my denomination. I grew up in a Presbyterian church, and I was involved with like a Reformed church and a non-denominational church. I also had a group of friends that were very charismatic, almost like flirting with like new apostolic reformation kind of stuff. Oh, Ruby. So a lot. That's interesting. Godspeed says, in my seminary, we were taught to deal with unbelievers and atheists by pretty much giving word salad and the same old tired talking points like Romans 1:20. Alan, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Alan says, thank you for doing lives. You and others in the space have helped out so much with me not feeling like I'm the crazy one when it comes to not believing. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it's helpful. Because, yeah, you aren't crazy, you know, and you're not the only one who's having these questions and having these doubts. I think so many people are silently or secretly questioning too. Raging says, I feel like morality being subjective kind of undermines its meaning. Moral claims like murder is wrong are weak if it's a person to person perspective and there's no real right or wrong. Yeah, it is. I think if you've been under the impression that it's objective, it is frustrating, you know, to see it that way. But I do think that that is the reality. The reality is that moral standards are things that we create. And we all say murder is wrong because we know how much harm it causes. And generally, most people don't want to cause harm. Again, there's certainly exceptions. And so it's wrong because we don't want to feel that pain, you know? And I don't know, I think that's enough. Oh, Atheist, thank you so much. Atheist from the moon with the super chat says, just stopping to give a gift. That's so kind. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Nas says, I remember years ago I was waiting for a pickup basketball game. A guy next to me was also waiting. He saw an iPhone on the ground and he looked at me and said his faith was his reason not to steal it. These are the people that need faith. Yeah, it's interesting. It's, you know, and it's kind of like the lowest tier of moral development. If your sense of right and wrong is just about rewards and punishments, you know, something is wrong because if I do it, I'll get in trouble. That's kind of like the bottom level of moral development. Versus if you allow more development, eventually things are right and wrong because of how they affect other people, and because you have core values. And if that's your moral compass, then you're much more likely to be moral when no one's looking, right? Because you have this inner sense versus just the fear of punishment. Alan says, in many ways, I became more moral when I stopped believing 10 years ago. Oh, well, thanks, GOP. GOP says, hi, good to see you again. As you know, I'm a believer in Jesus, but I'm also appreciative of your content. I question things as well, but my faith keeps me grounded, but I have my moments. And I support you in that. Yeah, that's awesome. Laylee says, would you say humanity has made morality to be carved for survival or another purpose? So morality evolved because it helped us survive as a species. When we are attuned to other people's needs, when we have increased compassion and we work together better, we can organize into societies, we can share work, we can learn medicine and, help other members heal. We can have stronger members taking care of weaker ones. And so the whole species thrives when we have that moral system. So it's not like humans sat down and thought, what should we make moral? It's not like that level of decision making. Well, thanks, Andrew. I'm glad you're here. Would you say this is also based on emotion? So like I said previously, it's empathy and logic. So both things. I don't think there are any decisions that you can make that are purely emotional or purely intellectual. You always kind of have both systems running at the same time. Yeah, and Alan says, I also have exponentially more compassion for others than when I believed. Yeah, Umair says, we do sit down and decide on some immoral actions, make laws and prescribe punishments. Yes, but it wasn't like we decided to have a sense of morality. Yeah, definitely, Felix. It comes from us being social animals. Do you believe there is something fundamental to the US and its role religion plays? Man, I am not a historian, I think so I could speculate. There have been some very concerted, thoughtful efforts to interject more and more religion into our government. But how culture and money and power are all connecting to keep us such a religious country, yeah, it's outside of my expertise to fully explain it. Oh, well, hi, Sunny. Laylee says, my logic is if we entrusted all humans to the basis of morality just from survival and even emotion alone, we would have been far from where we are now. Well, again, it's not purely emotion. We have emotion and logic. But you can see how moral systems have evolved over time, right? Look at the Old Testament. These were nomadic people who had pretty ruthless laws and were okay with slavery, were okay with treating women as property. And as, decades and centuries pass, you can see us as a species becoming more aware of how our actions are affecting other people. So, I think that is what's happening. Godspeed says, I think we're moral because it's in our mutual self-interest. It's good for me to do what's good for you and vice versa. Yeah, that actually reminds me of an episode of Friends where Joey says there's no such thing as a selfless good deed. And it's interesting, because I agree that there's also this positive feedback loop. Like if you are kind to someone, you make them feel better. Something positive happens on their end. And when you see that you helped someone, you feel good. And so something positive is happening on your end. Um, and so, does that mean the act is selfish or in your self-interest? I don't know. I mean, I see those things as being intertwined. So I think I agree with you. Bye, Joe. Raging says, so would you say slavery was morally right and accepted in the Old Testament, but we evolved into believing it's morally wrong? Yeah, so the way you're asking that question is kind of going back and forth between are there objective morals or not? I would say the people at that time did seem to be okay with it. In the Old Testament, everyone seemed to think that that was acceptable. I can say from my brain and my moral code, I don't think it's ever acceptable, no matter what the context or culture. But that is, yeah, my morals coming from my brain. So if you look at culture, then yeah, it evolved, it changed. Humans used to think that this practice was okay, and now we don't think that it's okay. And I know you're wanting this objective ruler to say it's objectively right and wrong. And I think the only thing I can give you is that we know how much harm it causes. And generally, as humans, we don't want to harm each other. Fair enough. Yeah, Jim says, and again, pretty sure the slaves didn't think it was okay. Agree. I agree with you. Yeah. Another example of, history being written by the victors. Oh, hey, John, welcome. Yeah, I mean, certainly the Old Testament God was okay with it. So you have to deal with that, unfortunately. I agree with you, Sonny. I understand that. Yeah, Raging says, yeah, I agree. I guess it's just difficult for me not to be able to say that genocide, for example, is objectively evil. I get that. Um, yeah, it would be nicer to be able to just say that. And I can certainly say, well, for my moral code, it's always wrong. Like it's always bad. Um, and as far as I can go. Alrighty, friends, it is 11:30 my time, so I need to get to bed. Um, thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I will be back on YouTube next Tuesday. Um, and if you want to get in touch with me, TikTok's a better way to do it. So I have the same handle over on TikTok. Um, you too, Lainey. And also, I do have my new, Healing with Movement guide that is in the link in my bio too. So have a wonderful night. And again, thank you so much for being here.